Hey YA nerds, Reading Rue here to talk to you about another great YA book that I just finished reading. This one's called Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios. It's 368 pages long and it was released last June on the 13th of 2017. Grace wants out of her house where her stepfather wields fear like a weapon and her mother makes her scrub imaginary dirt off the floors. Out of her California town, too small to contain her big city dreams. Out of her life and into the role of Parisian artist, New York director, anything but scared and alone. Enter Gavin, charming, talented, adored, controlling, dangerous. When Grace and Gavin fall in love, Grace is sure it's too good to be true. She has no idea that their relationship will become a prison she's unable to escape. Deeply affecting and unflinchingly honest, this is the story about spiraling into darkness and emerging into the light again. So, I literally finished this book 10 minutes ago, maybe 20 minutes ago, tops. So it's like really fresh in my mind right now, and that's why I was like, need to sit down, record the episode, put on my flower crown, and get going. So little backstory before I begin talking about the book. I was at a workshop last week, in between Reading Room episodes, about teen dating violence awareness and what the role as librarians could be in order to help teens that are in that situation get out of that situation. So Heather was there as a speaker. She gave this amazing presentation that we were all floored with, and she talked a lot about her book, Bad Romance. And the most amazing thing about the book, I think, and especially because she told us this, is that this all happened to her. She's Grace, essentially. She goes through this awful, horrible time in high school and comes out on the other side, you know, after everything happens. So I thought that was really interesting. I also learned during the workshop that 1 in 3 teens is affected by teen dating violence. And apparently February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, so kind of appropriate to do this the day after Valentine's Day, I think. You know, and I also found out too, like, gonna keep adding facts on top of facts, that a lot of teens who wind up in this situation have a really garbage home life, and or they have a really not a good time in their communities, and so they get isolated very easily by their abuser, and it turns out that their abuser is the only person that they can turn to. And yes, this does disproportionately affect female teens over male teens or non-binary teens, but when I talk about this, I use completely gender-neutral terms because it could happen to anyone. It's not hard to get torn away from your family if your family life is not great. It doesn't matter what gender you are. And if someone is manipulating you into thinking that they are the only things you need to survive, or the only person that you need to survive, you might believe them. So in the back of her book, and I'm going to put some links down below, she has some resources for teens that this is happening to currently, or if you're a friend of someone who's in like an abusive, awful relationship. And I don't mean like abusive like one person's hitting the other person, although yes, that too. I mean also like one person's making the other person feel smaller than themselves. There's a lot of belittling and manipulation, and if you read the book, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, because Gavin pulls all the tricks out of his bag. Now, more about the book, now that I've gotten the backstory out. This was recommended to me by the author, actually, so that's really cool, because it's rare that I ever get to talk to authors. I was immediately drawn in, mostly because this book is a little close to my heart. Fortunately, I am not a victim of dating violence, thank goodness. I was in a couple of really bad relationships in high school, but nothing to this extent, and I got out of there really easily, and I was also in a lot of good relationships in high school and college and everything. I did notice that there were some things that Gavin said in the book, or some things that he did in the book, that I've been guilty of, so it was a little eye-opening in that regard. I'm actually gonna like text my life partner later, talk to him about it. And there was also some things that Gavin had said that people have said to me, or like that Grace's parents said that my parents have said to me. So it was painful to read, but in a good way. I don't know how to explain that. It was cathartic, is what I would really say. It was really, like, good to read. It made me feel better. I was also incredibly frustrated with this book because, again, I have a friend who's in a really bad situation with their significant other, and it doesn't matter what you say or do sometimes, like, that person has to get out of their relationship on their own. If you have any friends who are in bad situations like that, you probably know it's hard to talk to them about it. It's hard to tell them you need to leave. A lot of times they don't listen, and the only thing you can do is be there for them. So when I was reading this book, I kept picturing Grace as my friend and shouting at my book as I'm reading it, like, "Grace, stop, leave Gavin, what are you doing?" Of course, this is a character in a book and she can't hear me. But it was frustrating. But I don't mean that in a bad way. I really don't know how to talk about this book. I just finished reading it. You would think I would know better. You know, I think after reading the book, I want more people to read this book. I would recommend it to anyone. I would put it in anyone's hands, as long as, like, talking or reading about abuse and violence is not triggering. I will say, the story was amazing. It takes place in like a year, but it feels longer because of all the things that happen. You kind of wonder, like, could this happen to a person in a year? Long story short, it can. And I thought the language was really good. I think that the way Heather writes about teens talking, even the book's in second person, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. The way that Grace talks to Gavin in the book, it's like she's writing Gavin a letter in this whole book. And the way that Heather writes Grace speaking is exactly the way I hear teens talking, and even the way I talk, because I can't grow up to save my life. So I thought that was really great. Even listening to her talk at the meeting I was at, she sounds exactly the way she writes, which I think is fantastic. And I did love that all the characters had, like, this really powerful presence. Each one was very different, and even though at the beginning I got some names switched around, it was easy to figure out where I got that mixed up and go back and figure out who I was talking about. I think my only major complaint about the book is that it's called Bad Romance, and every time I look at this cover, I get Lady Gaga's song stuck in my head. It's happening right now, every time. So that's my only downside to the book. So for tropes, we have a couple, actually a lot of tropes, but I think, again, it's so fresh in my mind that it's very easy for me to be like, this, that, this, that. Again, if you don't know, if you've never watched a video of mine before, these are all tropes that I've made up or accumulated off the internet or talked to my young adult librarians about, and they've given me suggestions. And if you don't know what any of them mean, although a lot of them are self-explanatory, there will be descriptions down below or there will be definitions down below in the description, rather. So we have wrecking ball endings, no school, love triangles, strong/smart female protagonist, broken family units, beauty blind, love at first sight, the brooding bad boy, classic fiction isn't that good, girl, and SAT vocabulary. For my rating, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 just because it was very frustrating. I think it's meant to be frustrating. I think I'm just harping on that. So my favorite part, backstory, Grace is going on a drama theater trip with her theater friends, and they're driving out to Oregon. And at this point in the story, Gavin is really controlling. He needs Grace to call him every 10 seconds, or if, you know, he calls and she doesn't answer the phone, he gets really angry at her and is very manipulative. And so she's on this bus, and the thing that struck me at first was that she's like, I'm free from him. And in my head, I'm like, you shouldn't be thinking that if you're with somebody. So she meets this kid, Gideon, And they're sitting on the bus together. I'm just going to read a little bit of this. So, we've actually become pretty good friends. Not that I would ever tell you that. Gideon has my back and helps wrangle people when Miss B is not around. And he runs lines with the actors who are struggling. He was formerly more of a choir geek, but transferred into our advanced drama class in January. And now he's part of our little group. It's crazy how doing a show with someone can make you so close so fast. Gideon is my kind of people. We pretty much like all the same things, except he's obsessed with manga and kung fu movies, neither of which interests me. But that's okay because he loves Radiohead, reads even more than I do, and wants to travel the world someday. As our bus passes through California's drought-ridden Central Valley and into the lush green of Northern California, we sit slouched low in our seat, heads bent together as we create an imaginary itinerary for a round-the-world trip. Okay, he says, pushing his glasses up as they slide down his nose. We have a big decision to make here. Switzerland or Prague? Prague is non-negotiable, I say. Oh, really? And why, pray tell, is that? I'm part Czech. There's like a statue of one of my ancestors in a small town near there. Gideon nods, all business, as he adds Prague to our itinerary. Fair enough, he says. I won't stand in the way of rediscovering one's roots. But since you got that choice, I get first choice in Asia. By all means, I say. He does research on his phone for hostels, and we discover that in Asia, it would actually be cheaper to share a room at a guest house, since they don't really have hostels there. Are you a bed hog, I ask? He grins. Oh yeah, you better bring a sleeping bag. And that's when I realize we're flirting with each other. I have that lightheaded butterfly feeling I used to get with you, and I'm suddenly very aware of how my knee is touching Gideon's, and the way his hair curls just over his ears. He's wearing a shirt covered in Chinese character, and he's written F War on the toes of his high-top all-stars, an outfit so totally him, nerdy iconoclast. I like the fact that he carries a messenger bag instead of a backpack. It adds to the whole hipster scholar vibe he's got going on. I'm a sucker for guys with style. You're evidence of that. Gideon's hand brushes mine as he sketches in Mount Fuji on the map we've been making. I go still, every part of me aware of the warmth his touch leaves behind. I want him to touch me again. Fudge. Well, except she says the real world, but I'm not going to say it. We spend the next 4 hours carefully detailing our itinerary, squabbling over cities and travel routes, laughing at our growling bellies. We should be stopping for lunch soon, but I don't want to stop because I'm having so much fun flirting with Gideon. Crap. I've always been like this, a fast faller. The first time I saw you, I turned into one of those cartoon characters with popping hard eyes. I went from not knowing you existed to thinking about you every second of every day for 3 years. I'm telling you, we have to go on the Trans-Siberian, he's saying. But that won't leave us very much time to go to Moscow and St. Petersburg, I argue. He frowns. Riding across Siberia in a train would make me an official badass. I think swimming in the Great Barrier Reef will take care of that. Oh, you're so totally cool with that great white sharks, but we can't go to the Sahara because of scorpions, he says, genuinely incredulous. I laugh, and Peter peeks over the seat in front of us. I hadn't noticed he and Kyle were sitting there. I guess I was distracted. You know, Gavin will never let you go on a round-the-world trip with another dude, right? Peter says, because he's a nosy bitch. Gideon snorts. Let? That's a bit 1840, don't you think? He turns to me. He's joking, right? I ignore Gideon and scoot closer to the window as I glare at Peter. I hope he didn't notice how close we've been getting. This is purely hypothetical enterprise, I say. But I break out in a cold sweat. Will Peter or Kyle tell you I sat with a boy on the bus? Does this count as being alone with another guy? Peter just lifts his eyebrows. If you say so. He turns around and sits back down. Gideon looks at me, his head cocked to the side. He turns to a fresh piece of notebook paper and scrawls across it in a scratchy handwriting. You okay? I'm going to stop there, because if I don't stop there, I'm going to keep going. That's my favorite part. Needless to say, new guy comes into the picture. If you want to find out what happens, you should read it. So for the age range, this is really hard for me for this book specifically, because part of me wants to recommend it just for older teens, but I also know how easy it is for like anyone to like fall into a relationship as toxic and awful as Gavin and Grace's is. I'm not a fool. I know that there are some younger teens who are sexually active or dating older people who can hurt them. So I cautiously say that any age group can read this book. Though I do want to say 15, 16, 17 plus for the language and the sexual situations, of which there are many. And I also want to give a warning to anyone who's ever been abused by a significant other that this book can be really triggering. There's like a rape scene in it, and there's a lot of like sexual abuse. So, you know, just keep that in mind. You know, for others, it can be really cathartic to read and helpful. And I know Heather put like a lot of thought into that and how it would come across to other people. So, you know, and I do also think it really helps that she put a lot of resources in the back, of which I will show you that page really quick. But I'm also going to post all of these links down below because, again, this is really important. There it is. Resources right here. And again, I'll post them down below. So, that's Bad Romance. I tried to make this review as quick as I could, but I'm always going to go over like 15 minutes these days because I can't shut up to save my life. And I hope you guys pick it up. It's really good. Really, really good. And again, Heather is a delight. Give her all your money. She's great. And I guess that's all I have to say for that. Happy Valentine's Day, and peace out, YA nerds.